Help us out here. What does this say?
The word here, Kappa Omicron Rho, it means the chief Koruphe of what?
Right, the chief of what?
For nearly 2,000 years, Christians believed they knew every word Jesus ever spoke. But beneath the mud of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists uncovered a message sealed in stone. It wasn't written in any gospel. It wasn't taught in any church. And according to some scholars, it may preserve words Jesus spoke to Peter that were never meant to be lost, only buried. The inscription raised questions, but the ground beneath it raised a bigger one. What kind of place builds a church like this? The Gospels mention a town on this shore, a fishing village where Peter, Andrew, and Philip once lived, a place where Jesus called his first followers, a place that should have been remembered forever. Bethsaida. And yet, after the 1st century, it vanished. Floods reshaped the shoreline. The Jordan shifted its mouth. Mud swallowed roads. Houses collapsed into silence. By the time early pilgrims arrived centuries later, the town was already gone. They searched by memory alone. Some guessed, some hoped. None could prove they were right. For generations, scholars argued over its location. One site lay inland, built on a mound. Another sat closer to the water, flat and flooded. Each had fragments of evidence. Neither had certainty. Bethsaida became a question mark in Christian history, named in Scripture, missing from the map. Until this dig. Beneath the church, archaeologists uncovered older layers, not marble or mosaic, but ordinary life, fishing hooks, net weights, simple clay bowls darkened by use, coins worn smooth by trade, the kind of objects families leave behind when they work the water for survival. According to reports from the site, these layers dated to the 1st century. A fishing town, on the shore, exactly where the Gospels placed it. Some researchers began to wonder if the church wasn't just built near Bethsaida, but over it, as if later builders chose this ground not for convenience, but for memory. If this really was Bethsaida, then the floor above it wasn't decoration, it was a marker. And markers are never placed without a reason. The size of the church surprised everyone. This wasn't a small village chapel. Its floor stretched wide, its walls were thick and carefully set. Columns once stood in straight lines, supporting a roof built to shelter crowds, not families. According to field observations, this was a place meant for visitors. Guest rooms appeared along the edges. A courtyard opened near the entrance. Traces of a bath complex surfaced nearby. These weren't luxuries. They were signs of movement, of people arriving, staying, leaving. Pilgrims. In the early centuries of Christianity, believers didn't travel to read plaques or inspect relics. They traveled to stand where stories said something had happened. Churches were built over caves, wells, hillsides, places marked by memory, not proof. Stone became a way to hold a story in place. The builders of this church followed that pattern. They didn't level the land and start fresh. They built directly over the older town, over its streets, over its homes, over the remains of daily life. Some archaeologists believe that choice was deliberate. If Bethsaida mattered, then this ground mattered. And if Peter mattered, then this was where his story began. By the time the church was built, centuries had passed. Theology had grown. Traditions had formed. But local memory often moved faster than doctrine. It stayed close to the land, close to the shore. This church didn't try to explain anything. It didn't argue. It simply marked the place. And at the center of that mark, set into the floor where every pilgrim would stand, was an inscription. Not on a wall, not raised above the people, but beneath their feet. As if the builders wanted the words to be felt before they were understood. Why place the message on the floor and not where everyone could read it easily? The inscription sat in the center of the nave, a wide open space where worshippers once stood shoulder to shoulder. A ring of bright tiles framed the text, guiding the eye inward. According to those present, the letters were sharp, clean, even. This wasn't rushed work. At first, the wording felt familiar. A dedication, a name, a servant of Christ, language common to church floors of the period. Then came the honorific, Peter, chief of the apostles, bearer of the keys. No surprise there. Those titles appeared elsewhere in early Christian art. They echoed a promise from the Gospel of Matthew. Most of the team expected the line to end there. It didn't. The final phrase stopped the reading. It spoke of the keys again, but not as Scripture recorded them. The wording pointed upward, beyond the kingdom, toward layered heavens, a phrase no one could recall seeing before. According to epigraphers, this exact wording does not appear in known biblical manuscripts. Linguists noted that the structure felt older, less polished, as if it carried the shape of another language beneath the Greek. Some suggested it reflected local preaching. Others said it sounded like memory, not text, a saying repeated aloud long before anyone thought to write it down. Caution followed quickly. No one claimed it changed Scripture. No one called it proof. Reports from the site used careful language, expanded wording, local tradition, possible preservation. Still, the unease lingered. Because churches did not carve uncertainty into stone. Mosaics taught belief. They didn't experiment. If this phrase was placed here on purpose, then it meant something to the people who built the floor. And whatever that meaning was, it hadn't come from a book. For a time, the inscription was thought to be complete. The floor was documented, photographed, covered again for protection. But some details refused to settle. Tiny irregularities along the outer edge of the mosaic, marks too faint to read under normal light, so the team returned with new tools. Infrared imaging was brought in to scan the surface, a method often used when stone has been worn down by time. According to later reports, the camera revealed something unexpected. A thin circular band of text surrounding the main inscription. It was almost gone, invisible to the eye, blurred by centuries of wear, missed the first time. As the images sharpened, shapes separated from stone. Not decoration, letters, broken in places, but intentional. Epigraphers traced the ring slowly, comparing angles, spacing, rhythm. The room fell quiet. The line wasn't long, but it didn't read like a dedication. It read like speech, direct, personal. According to preliminary reconstructions, it began with a simple phrase, "He said to him." That alone caused pause. Church mosaics rarely quote direct speech, and when they do, they quote scripture everyone knows. This line did neither. It continued with a charge, a command, and then a promise that pointed upward, beyond the earth. Scholars urged restraint. Reconstructions are interpretive. Infrared images can deceive. A single misread letter could change the meaning entirely. But even caution couldn't erase the weight of the moment. If this line was remembered correctly, then the builders of this church believed they were preserving something spoken, not invented, not symbolic, spoken. And if so, the words beneath the words were never meant for paper, they were meant for place. The reconstructed line was short, but its meaning was heavy. According to working translations, the sentence carried two movements, one downward, one upward, a charge given on earth paired with a promise beyond it. Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens. The wording felt familiar, yet different. It echoed known teachings, but didn't repeat them. Some linguists noted the rhythm felt older than polished Greek, closer to spoken phrases passed from mouth to mouth. Still, no one called it a new gospel. Reports from the site were careful. The line was described as an early local tradition, a remembered saying, an expanded form of a known promise, not scripture, not proof. But meaning doesn't wait for permission. If the charge was remembered accurately, then Peter's role shifted, not as ruler, not as judge, but as a guard, a steward, someone left behind to protect what had begun, while another work continued elsewhere. Some scholars found that idea unsettling. For centuries, debates about Peter had focused on power, authority, leadership. This line spoke of responsibility instead, of watchfulness, of holding ground. It also raised another question: why preserve this version here? By the time this church was built, ideas about Peter were already forming across the Christian world. Titles had grown, traditions had spread. And yet this mosaic didn't celebrate triumph or command. It preserved a task, a house to guard, a promise still unfinished. That choice felt intentional. And if it was intentional, then the builders believed this ground mattered, not just as a birthplace of faith, but as the place where that charge was first given. Long before councils met, before titles hardened, before authority was debated, belief lived closer to the ground. It lived in places. The church at this site was not built by emperors. It was not commissioned from distant capitals. According to archaeological patterns, it was raised by local believers who still walked the same shoreline their grandparents had known. That mattered, because memory changes as it travels. In Rome, Peter became a symbol of order. In distant cities, his name carried weight and structure. But here, near the water where nets were once cast, his memory looked different. The mosaic did not place him above others. It did not crown him. It did not speak of rule. It gave him a task. Some scholars believe this reflects an older layer of belief, one formed before arguments over rank and authority. A version of Peter remembered not as a ruler of men, but as a watcher, a keeper of continuity, someone trusted to remain. That interpretation has drawn quiet debate, not because it rewrites doctrine, but because it suggests something earlier survived beneath it, a local understanding that never fully spread, but was never forgotten either. And this church may have been built to protect that understanding. Pilgrims who stood on this floor would not read a sermon. They would stand over a memory, their feet placed where others believed words once fell. Stone does not argue, it preserves. And preservation can be more powerful than proof. If this mosaic carries a local memory, then it tells us how the earliest followers near Galilee understood what mattered most, not authority, but care, not power, but presence. The floor was sealed again. Protective layers were laid down. Access was limited. Images were sent out quietly for review. According to reports, discussions moved behind closed doors. Language became careful. Public statements grew shorter, not because the discovery was dismissed, but because it couldn't be explained away. The mosaic remains where it has always been, on the shore, above the old town, over ground shaped by nets, boats, and memory. The inscription still sits beneath where pilgrims once stood, its meaning resting somewhere between belief and history. No new gospel was announced, no doctrine was overturned, and yet something shifted. Because this church did not preserve a rule, it preserved a moment, a charge remembered in a place where memory still mattered more than power, where Peter was not remembered as distant or crowned, but as someone left behind to guard. If these words were shaped by later belief, then they show how early Christians near Galilee understood trust. If they preserve an older memory, then they point to something even harder to face, that not everything Jesus said was meant to travel the world. Some words belong to places, and some memories survive only if the ground remembers them. The shoreline still changes, water rises, water falls, stone appears, stone disappears. What has already surfaced once may surface again. And if this was not the only message sealed into the earth, what else might still be waiting beneath the mud of Galilee, remembered by stone, but never written down?